Good morning.
Good morning.
I thought it would be good if I actually gave a real book report. I've encountered a number of books recently that have really influenced the way I intend to finish this deal. And I want to talk to you about them because this is a somewhat older sangha.
What?
Well, I think most of us are over 50. All of us are over 50. And it's my opinion that if you're over 50, you need to read these books. I don't know if I'll be able to get to all of them. I may have to put it off for another time, some of them. But I only intend to talk about 4. The first one is a book by a man who is the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Grant, who is a writer for The New Yorker and is on the faculty of Harvard and is a surgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Those aren't too shabby credentials.
No.
Sounds like the guy I want to be. And I don't think he's 50. But he decided to write a book with the title of, and he's a very good writer, he's a really good writer, with the title of Being Mortal. I've heard a number of people say that we are living in the golden age of medicine. And I would have to agree with them. I was born in 1945, and I was born as the son of a surgeon, and my mother was a nurse, an RN. So I've had sort of a lifelong exposure to the medical community in one way or another. I've worked in a lot of hospitals myself, and I've done a lot of hospice volunteering. And I've recently been sick a lot, and that entitles me to some creds. And I can tell you from my experience that the evolution of medicine in this country is truly amazing. I remember having my tonsils out when I was about 9 years old, which was a procedure that was commonly performed on children of that age. I had both my tonsils and my adenoids taken out. I was put to sleep with ether.
Me too.
Yeah, me too.
And the instruments and everything else, the procedure itself that they used at that time was really, by modern standards, horrific. It involved, an instrument in particular, a stainless steel tool with a snare at the end of it. If they would encircle your tonsil and jerk it out. Now, of course, they don't even, they seldom prescribe a TNA operation for children. At that time it was pro forma. And I and my 2 sisters were all lined up in the hall and let in. I guess it's a form of oral castration.
It didn't really work on you, did it?
We did get ice cream afterwards.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the good part. Well, medicine, of course, has evolved greatly since then. When I was scrubbing in the hospital, we had no disposable instruments. We had to autoclave everything, including the drapes that we used during the procedure. And the masks that we wore on our faces. And the cloth coverings that we had on our shoes. Everything had to be sterilized. Syringes, needles, all of that was autoclaved and reused again, and again, and again.
Autoclave?
Yeah.
Sterilized. Oh,
Yeah, it's like a big pressure cooker
oh.
that develops a lot of heat and pressure. And you leave them in there for an hour and a half or so. That's what we did in the afternoon, after all the procedures were over. But just in our ability to see into the human body has changed tremendously. You know, with MRIs and
CAT scans.
CAT scans and all that stuff. But as Atul Gawande points out in his book, none of this keeps us from dying. We still die. The average age at which we die has gone up appreciably. It has certainly succeeded in delaying a lot of death, but there is no escaping it. And that creates a problem. That creates a very big conundrum for the medical profession. And I found myself ensnared in that conundrum about 6 months ago. Because I had received 2 major operations and 4 rounds of chemo, which was a lot by anybody's standard. And I was still alive, but I was at a point in my disease where there was no possibility of curing it. They could no longer operate on me. And I was thoroughly sick and tired of the chemotherapy. And I think it had lost a lot of its effectiveness, which is a common thing to happen in prolonged cases like mine. So, you know, I made the decision that I needed to stop all that and just simply let nature take its course, because I felt that I was entitled to living my life and finishing my life on my own terms. Fortunately, I had an oncologist, a doctor, who understood that perfectly well. But as Gawande points out in his book repeatedly, this is a big book. It's over 300 pages and it's chock full of stories of patients who have found themselves ensnared in a very similar situation to the one that I found myself in. Eventually, the problem is this. Here is the heart of the conundrum. Medical science has developed to such an extent that there is always another course of treatment, that there is always another way to look at it or to do it, an additional pill, a trial to participate in. You know, there's always something else. And the other thing that has happened to the medical profession that must be taken into account is the retail aspect of it.
Mm.
You know, when I was a child, I think that the medical profession was much more monastic than it is today. I mean, doctors actually cared about their patients and wanted to help them, and they got into the profession primarily out of compassion. By the time I got to graduate school at Brandeis and became a member of the pre-med committee, I learned that that had completely disappeared. Students were no longer interested in compassion, they were interested in an annual income. And a lot of doctors were going to medical school for no other reason than to make a lot of money. And they were choosing professions that would afford them the greatest amount of money, which is a subject I'll get to in a minute, in another book. But they can always dangle something else in front of you. And our inclination very often is to want to take it, because it offers us hope in some form, and in some amount, sometimes very small. And you know, when a patient has a dire medical condition, he is not the only one being treated. He has a family very often, or he has friends and colleagues who care about him or her. And the decisions that are made are done, that are necessarily have to be done on behalf of all these other participants. To some degree, I was in that situation as well. But I finally decided that I no longer wanted to participate, because the quality of my life was so bad, in my opinion. And so I placed myself in a position where it's going to get a whole lot worse. But, you know, in the meantime, I'm having a pretty good time. I really strongly recommend this book. It is well written. He is a marvelous writer. He talks in great detail about the disintegration of our organs and the progression of certain diseases, and gives ample examples of all of this from his own experience, or experience that he's well acquainted with. It brings the medical profession down to earth, I think. Because, you know, it doesn't matter how much education you have, or how spiritual or not you may be, or how long your grandparents lived, or how resistant to disease you have been throughout your life, or anything else. You're going to die. And you need to know the truth about your situation and how you want to handle it. And this book, I think, will help you make those kinds of decisions. So, the second book that I want to talk about is a book that is written by a woman, 30 years of age, who went to my old alma mater, the University of Chicago, and from there went to funerary school and learned how to embalm bodies. Her name is Caitlin Doughty, Doughty. And she has written a book about the burial business of this country, and has some she's very strongly opinionated in some respects about this. Here again, there has been a very steep and rapid evolution in how we deal with our dead relations in this country. Prior to 1950, most people died at home. And a great many of them were buried out of the house. I mean, they didn't go to a funeral home or whatever, they were simply put in the ground. That has totally changed. Embalming has become very widespread, very prevalent. Though she also points out that since 1960, more than half of all the burials in this country are cremations. That people are becoming cremated.
They wouldn't be embalmed then, is that correct?
I beg your pardon?
They would not be embalmed if they were cremated?
No.
No.
No. But there was, I don't know, has anybody here read The American Way of Death by Jessica Mitford, which was published in 1963? I remember when that book came out. That was, you've read that book? I bet you've done it in connection with your work. That was really a world-changing book when it was published, because Mitford made a very strong case about funeral homes and the expense of funeral homes and the non-necessity of funeral homes. And Caitlin Doughty takes that quite a bit further. As a matter of fact, she has her own alternative funeral home. It's called Undertaking LA. And it consists of 2 licensed morticians who tell the public, you don't need us. She wrote, her book is entitled When Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Now it's just smoke gets in your eyes and other lessons from the crematory. And you know, the inspiration for her book really stems from the fact that she wants families to be more involved in funerals. She wants them to be aware of the different kinds of funerals are possible. And she talks a lot about what she calls natural burial, and which is also referred to as green burial, in which the body is not embalmed at all, but it's either placed in a cardboard or light wooden coffin or nothing at all and just put in the ground. She talks about sky burials. She talks about alkaline hydrolysis, which is liquid cremation. And that's
It's just rapid.
well, you know, this is part.
More than
This is part of the problem. You know, we don't like to talk about this. You know,
Well,
so we pay other people to talk about
This
this.
is melting of the body.
Yeah.
pretty much is.
Yeah.
Faster than
We've gone
decomposition.
from big piles of wood to big gas burners. and-
Right. I mean, it's an extremely efficient way of doing it, and you know, there's very little harm to the environment doing that.
So
What
What
what,
do they use for it?
Why?
what
Oh,
is
just
that
lime.
involved? Oh, lime.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Are sky burials available in the US?
You know, I was thinking, you know, I'm gonna get to this in a minute.
Okay.
I would really like to find a way to have a sky burial in this country, but I have no idea how we're gonna do that.
What is a sky burial?
A sky burial is where you cut up the body
Are you,
and you crush the bones and you spread them over the side of a mountain.
Feed them to the
that would
vultures.
be pretty nasty for
How you
hiking.
doing?
Well, that's part of the problem, isn't it?
There's Daishiroshi.
Wouldn't the ravens like it?
Yes,
Oh,
I
lots of
assume they
them.
would.
Not enough of them.
Right.
So these all must be very, very expensive though.
Pardon?
They must all be very
No,
expensive,
that's it, they're all cheap. It's,
really.
it's
Yeah.
the morticians that are expensive.
For example,
But somebody has to put you in the lie.
you know, one thing that I am seriously considering for myself, what I'm seriously considering for myself is a green burial.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, traditionally, most Buddhists around the world are cremated. But that has become really environmentally awkward. And a green burial is much less that. And, you know, I could go, I've already talked to Berard Nellies here in town. I can go over there, arrange to be cremated, and they're only gonna charge me $4,000 to do it.
Oh,
Yeah. You
Or-
get the facility.
Or I can get the Neptune Society to cremate me, and that's for substantially less. Or I can have a green burial, and I'm in the process of applying to the city of Santa Fe, to the county of Santa Fe, for 2 permits, one for myself and one for Kenji, to be buried on this property for $5.
Yeah.
Along with Allegro and.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
Look,
can I
14
say the
of
other
those.
thing about green burial that's rather nice is that you feed the earth again.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is
Yeah.
that you're giving back your nutrients to the earth. That's one of the things that I think is
Well,
so appealing.
you
about
do it in all the other ways too, you know.
Not
Nothing-
quite the same with cremation though, as you
Oh.
do.
Yes, you do.
You have a lot of minerals.
Yeah, but just minerals, they get to eat your flesh. The
Yeah.
little
Well, let
worms
me-
and stuff.
Let me finish by reading you the last method of treating a body.
Sitting on an outside.
It's promession, 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 which is composting by freeze drying.
oh my heavens,
Yeah. They
no pun intended.
they freeze dry you, and then your body crumbles into dust, and it's helped
Ah, I like that.
in certain ways. And all of your metallic objects are withdrawn, like you would have quite a load.
I'd have a box full.
And then you just, you know, what's left is minerals,
Sounds
which
great.
you can then scoop up and scatter across the planet. So you're doing the same thing. Yeah, there's no difference.
Well, except that you have to spend energy to freeze.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But right now, I'm seriously thinking about having a green burial because we can do that for the grand sum of $5 and, you know, a case of beer for the backhoe.
Meet the back.
And also, I can do that right outside this door,
Yeah.
and we can have a service in here,
Yep.
and then just go out and you guys can have the privilege of filling it in.
Yep.
Are you still thinking of getting some kind of a permit for a green
I'm looking into that.
cemetery?
I'm in contact with
Oh.
the guy down at the county who is in charge of land use and who is also in charge of permit, and, you know, a home burial is a form of land use.
Mhm.
Creating a cemetery is another form of land use,
Mhm.
much more serious. but we're gonna talk about that. You know, I would love to have, to have these 10 acres dedicated to a Buddhist cemetery, a green cemetery. Right over this ridge out this window is the Galisteo Basin Preserve, and they have a green cemetery, which is open to the public. I mean, anybody can be buried there.
Yeah.
And it is there are very few acknowledged and licensed green cemeteries, and that is all just recently beginning to get organized. There is now an organization that accredits such things, and they've already been accredited and everything. And I assume that we would probably want to go through the same thing here if we were able to do it. But you know, the part of the problem is the way people regard death and cemeteries and everything that surrounds all that. And I would certainly expect to encounter a certain amount of resistance from the neighborhood or from across the street or from, you know, up the road. Gretchen knows all about that. So,
If you don't believe in fencing.
Nobody's gonna see it.
but on the other hand, I've never been shy about such things, and we'll see what happens. Okay. Well, anyways, smoke gets in your eyes and other lessons from the crematory. I really recommend that one.
I think she was on Fresh Air.
And she
Mhm.
was.
She was.
She's
You are.
fascinating.
That's where I heard her.
Yeah,
that's
Terry
right.
Gross, Fresh Air. You can hear the interview. It's great.
She's an interesting lady.
She's trying to talk everybody out of using a mortician.
What time is it?
11.
She's a
11.
website too.
It's 11.
I think I've done enough. I've done enough. There was I wanted to talk about 2 other books. One of them is not even a book. One of them is an article that appeared in the New York Times Magazine this morning that is very interesting and has a bearing on all this. And the other one is a collection of essays by Ann Paget that was published last year, and which I'm finally getting around to reading, and I am enthralled with that woman and her writing.
What's it called?
I want to get it right. This is the story of a happy marriage,
Oh, yeah, okay.
and it's anything but happy. But there is one essay, and it's a collection of essays, it's not a collection of stories. And one essay in this book has to do with the death of her grandmother and her care for her grandmother before she died, which is positively the best thing I have read on hospice. I really recommend it.